Yeah, y'all can hear okay? So, thank you all for having me for the next 10 hours in which I will slowly go through my large tome piece by piece. No, I'm going to go, what I want to do is really just to present some material to you rather rapidly, enable you to think and ponder, kind of engage that a little bit, and then for us to engage in some conversation. So I'm hoping I'll be watching the time and seeing how this goes. If just a couple of pieces, as I'll be talking about information from a new book called Church and new book called Generous Community. Generous Community has a study guide in it. I want to point out that you can go to a website called amplifiedchurch.com, and it has videos and a curriculum that goes along with those two books. If you want to tweet out your notes today, make sure you use the Forma 16. You could also use Amplified Church, or if you want to tag me at Texas Bishop. So that's just kind of by way of basic stuff. Let me just say that the Diocese of Texas is a very diverse diocese. And after serving for 7 years as bishop and watching the church struggle in this particular time in our culture, what I have noticed and wondered about, and just simply began to ask myself a question that eventually led to some conversion for me, which is, if you have all the money that you think you need, or you have no money at all, no resources, or you're struggling, is the gospel deterred by your present economic situation, number of volunteers, people attending your church? And if it isn't, then what are we going to do? What is our work to be church? And how are we going to provide a church over the next 50 years that is active and thriving in the future? And this is the conversation that I'm interested in. And so today I want to bring all of that with some laser focus to say that I want to talk about not only what shapes our future context about what church is going to look like, and engage that with what formation is going to have to look like in the midst of that. So what does it mean if formation is going to thrive? And I have a basic supposition. Now, I imagine that you will struggle a little bit, because I'm going to talk about, I'm out 40, 50 years here, okay? So and I'm going to get to this, but it's essential for us to think this way. If it is to thrive in that time period, then in this time period, we must untether it from the current pedagogical models and approaches and the Sunday-only Wednesday night program models of formation. And instead, we must begin to deeply root it in a relational and reflective form and approach to engaging with our people, because the future is at stake. The question is, what legacy will this generation of leaders leave? What story are you even now in this moment writing about your congregations and the formation work that's happening there? What is the headline that it's going to read in that chapter as they look back on our time period? And I think that part of the problem is that we begin by asking all the wrong questions. Now, probably wrong is a powerful word. Let's just say I don't think these questions get us anywhere or help us very much. So here they are. They're not questions I invented. They're actually Peter Bloch's questions from a book called Community. They have very little power. And I'm struck that leaders in our church are constantly asking these questions about every part of ministry. And these are not formational or transformational type questions. These are really about sustaining some kind of outmoded economy of church. And yet we continue to kind of throw ourselves into this, to really believe that if we answered all these questions, we would be okay, and we probably could return to this happy day, which I think was probably never quite as happy as we like to think it was. It certainly is nostalgic. And one of the things about nostalgia is it has nothing to do with reality. So whatever we keep looking back at and pretending that we're heading towards is an incredible mistake, I think. And I would offer that the church really doesn't think about the future a whole lot at all. We look at leaders, we look at programs, we constantly are trying to deal with our present context. Augustine of Hippo said, there's only the present. There's the present past, the present, and the present future. We're raising up leaders, looking at ways to engage, to do the work, to do the ministry, to do formation based upon what we remember, what we received. We're never imagining or looking out into the future about what might be needed next year, 10 years from now. So consequently, even if you go into some kind of ministry, it's going to be 5 to 10 years before you get all of the right credentials, and you could even affect the future of the church. And if you're a priest who all of a sudden feels a call, perhaps you feel a call, you're going to go to seminary, it'll be 10 to 12 years before you can affect any change. And I guarantee in 12 years, the church will have changed. So how we begin to look at, want to raise up people, invite people to participate with us, we have to lift our eyes up and begin to look out. I also think that it assumes that the kind of church model, the economy that we've received somehow is the high watermark and best use of all of our time. I could go on about that, and I'm glad to come back to it, but I don't agree. Regarding formation, it looks with a congregational program lens and with a mid-century pedagogical model, typically, and creates an observation bias. And this is one that we've been feeding ourselves for quite some time, and that is that the 3rd century Hippolytan catechesis model of 3-year processes is the best and only model for formation. And if we could just get people to show up for 3 years, we'd be okay. And then we make a universal claim that the great multiplication and exponential growth of Christianity is rooted in that particular process of formation, and then we all beat ourselves up because we're not good enough. We no longer run our churches, though, I think, based on some fear that we're going to get Christianity wrong, or that we're going to need to protect who God is, or some theology, and we've got to stop teaching a model which seeks to have people have the right answers. That's just not helpful to anybody. And I would offer, and I really believe, I think the culture is rejecting that wholeheartedly. Now, what we'll say about the culture is that we'll say, oh, well, they're not a bunch of joiners. Well, they are. They just don't want to join that. That is a lie we tell ourselves to make us feel better. So what does this mean for us? I think that it really means that people, we do not need to look for people who we can somehow make smart enough so that they can eventually understand the great mysteries of the church. This is why we call them mysteries, because they're not understandable. And there's never going to be enough education to get them to that point. So understanding that attending classes, being able to parrot back information is not how people receive a gospel that is trying to convince them that they are free, that they are forgiven, that there's enough love in this world, that there is mercy for all people. So a little bit about what I think we have to do. We have to look at the future. We have to think about where we're going. We've got to think about what we want to be achieving. We want to think about how we want to go about it. And I would suggest, I stole this completely from the Institute for the Future and put a church on it in order to make it look like it's something fancy for us. But it is to say that I think in a reflective model, what it means is that you're constantly looking and engaging in relationships and with the culture outside of the church, rather than, oh, we have something, we're going to put it on this kind of direct line, begin to move towards that. We'll achieve all the goals that we want to achieve. We'll have all these beautiful Christians at the end of the day. I think the reality for us is that as we have some foresight, some insight, we move into action, and then we start this reflection process, which needs to be cyclical and regular. What we'll find out is actually we're going to have to raise our tolerance for messiness. Future affects everything. There is, I promise you, there is no economic model that is going to save this church. All you have to do is the numbers. The way we go about evangelism is predominantly at our front door. If we do it there, we wait and believe that people will come to us, that they want what we have. That also is a lie that we tell ourselves. We are not paying attention to how work is changing in the world. We're not paying attention to how education is changing. We're not paying attention to how people are being formed in other parts of the world and what they're using, or how people are engaging in that. Thank you, that's much better. That doesn't mean I'm going to be less loud, though, probably. There are completely new ways in which people are forming themselves. So how many of you, just to kind of take a little jump off here for just a second, how many of you all know about this game called Minecraft? Right, okay, so somebody did a formation class on Minecraft at one of our church St. David. Yeah, awesome, good job. So, but here's what I want to tell you about Minecraft. So Minecraft is a deal where you play this game, and the graphics are awful. For a Gen Xer, I just don't even get it. But my child loves this thing. But here's the crazy thing. People who are into Minecraft will go online and watch other people play Minecraft. Right? They will watch this. And what happens is people are making money by playing Minecraft. What they do is they video their play, put it up there, advertise, and so my child watches it, and this person gets paid for the view of that video. What's happening, of course, is a deep formation trend, which is the child, or the person, or adult, and I'm sure there are adults who play this. It's okay, this is not confession time. But the reality is that what's happening is you're being formed. You're learning how to play by watching others. You're engaging. Don't believe for a second it's not real relationship with that group of people that they talk to all the time. So relationship, formation, all these things are being completely redefined. You say, oh, well, that's just a game, except that it isn't, because now there's this new group called Twitch. Twitch is where code, you know how you write code, for those of you, some people probably know about code writing, all the things that undergird all this business. So now what they figure out is they can actually video themselves writing code. Right? So if you want to learn how to write code, you join Twitch and you learn by watching others write code. Right? This just completely breaks down the pedagogical model that I'm going to stand up here and actually give you something. That actually the best model would be for you to follow me around for 2 weeks and see the people and things that I'm doing. See what I'm saying? That this is a completely different way of thinking about formation. And that kind of makes us all do this. And here's the good news, and I think it is good news. The real good news is, it's not dependent upon you. God is in charge of this deal. And the gospel of Jesus Christ is going to be undaunted by whatever failures you and I can possibly come up with. It's not going to be bound by our economics or our past ideas about what church is supposed to look like. God's gospel will be successful at the reconciliation work between God and the world through Jesus Christ. This is our faith, this is what we believe in, and we ought to start relying on it. Now, if we do that, that's going to push us a little bit, especially for us Episcopalians. Because if you were to do a time audit of your church, what you'd actually find is we spend almost all of our time at the altar. If you really did, you looked at how much how many people it takes each week in your community, how much time you spend, how much time people spend at the altar, what you would find is we are much more interested in serving one another at our altar than we are serving God's people in the world. And we should be attentive to that and confess it as a sin. Because at the end of the day, God intends the world to be completely transformed. And that's not going to happen by us living inside locked doors of churches. It's not going to happen because we build it and they come. But we must go out there with them and understand that the work of the people is to make liturgy in the world. The work of the people is to make liturgy in the world. I will tell you that we are concerned, I am concerned, with the false hierarchy that our current system brings. It focuses so much around that altar. The old program models of Christian formation, I think, at the end of the day, make specialists out of us instead of fellow disciples. And we can do this. And we can continue to pretend like we can save this thing. Now, I'm not one, I believe in the integrity of denominations. I believe there's a great future for the Episcopal Church. I don't believe church, as most of you experience church today, is going to go away. It's just shifting. It's just shifting. There will be churches in the future. But those churches will be affected by a VUCA world, a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And it's going to take vision, understanding, clarity, and agility to navigate that world. We are living in a secular age in which there has been a deep loss of transcendence, in which people believe everything can be determined right here inside of their head. The mystery is being completely taken out of life, and beauty is being sold. And I believe that the Episcopal Church, with its particular understanding of sacramental life, worship and service and formation, has something to offer a world which is critically ill and looking for hope. We aren't the same, and we're not going to be the same. So here's another reason why we have to begin to think differently about how we do things. So this is a little demographic information from Rice. They do a study in the city of Houston. They've been doing it for a number of years. And what you see here is a growing diversity. Houston now is a majority-minority city, which means that there are more people making up the minority populations as a group than the Anglo population. The city of Houston itself is losing somewhere between 3 and 8% of its Anglo population each year. Probably estimated to level off somewhere in the 20s in terms of the overall population. So what's going on? Well, this affects everybody. This is not just Houston, and it's not just, oh, what happens in Houston happens in blah, blah, blah. That's not what's going on. What's happening is in the 1960s we had major immigration reform. Prior to the 1960s, the vast majority of individuals who came to the U.S. were white from European countries. So our immigration was focused on having people who looked like us come to our country. And in the 1960s we shifted that. And so what we're seeing are the results of a diversified immigration policy. Right? Well, as Episcopalians, you just look around this room and ask yourselves, how do we match up with the way the world looks? And do we believe that that kind of diaspora segregation is okay? And is that what God intends with all of this beauty that's out there in the world, with all these people? And it's going to take a different kind of church, I guarantee a different kind of church, to be in relationship with this different mission context in which we are living in. The other big factor is this. 94% of the people by 2030 are going to live in urban areas. This is a mass movement. So your idea that suburban mission and the small town mission is going to continue to be as strong as it has, it's just not. It's changing radically. And transportation, working from home, all kinds of things. Accessibility, whole generation of people not even wanting to learn how to drive because they don't feel like they need to. Car industry suffering because people aren't buying first-time cars. This is a very real cultural trend that is affecting us. And in the midst of that, this culture is being shaped by people interested in small batch, people who want local, sustainable, and organic foods and restaurants and beer and everything else, and community. They want to make a real difference, and they want to invest their money and themselves in making that real difference. They want and are interested in journey and pilgrimage, and they have a high desire for experience. So a lot of people give me grief for this natural progression of the human being to the digital native. Ross Mayfield, who is a CEO of a group called Social Tech, says NetGens think of the computer as a door, not a box. A door, not a box. Previous generations have thought of it as some kind of a tool or some kind of appendage. The future church will not be limited to access only on Wednesday nights and Sundays, as I've said. Formation will be forming people throughout its network, whenever or wherever the self-learner taps into the community. And are you ready for that? Most congregations just barely getting on the web, let alone presenting the very best of themselves and wooing people into conversation about spirituality and religion. Formation will exist in a world where sharing in this manner is more intimate, more oblique, and more immediate, where people can actually see and watch others on, I think it's going to go live to video versus text, and so you might as well just jump into that, telling stories, how powerful it is when you watch, and how many, just think about your own Facebook. What do you share? What kinds of things are you sharing? Mostly text? What happens when you get a great video? What do you do with that? So you have to begin to understand that the way that we do this will transition and transform us in many new ways. Formation will tap into the lives of individuals, crowds, and groups. Formation will do this on the one hand to create conversations and mentoring, while on the other hand to connect and convene. It is a place, and it is a place. That is probably the biggest thing I want you to take away. The internet, this electronic world, all of this is a very real space and context. It is not something that just is over there. People are immersed in it. It is the place where we share who we are, we learn about things, we figure out where we're going to go, and what we might do. Do you all have, some of you may have this app on your phone that picks restaurants? Do y'all ever use that? Actually, the highest, this is not Open Table, I'm lost for the Yelp is one of them. Yeah, right, okay, so I'm just making sure, just bringing you along. So you know how those apps are most used? For the shake. You know what the shake is? The shake is where you shake it and it picks your restaurant. Right? Right. Why? Why? Think about that. Why? Adventure. Pilgrimage. I call it danger. I'm not ever going to do it. Don't trust it. But that just gives you a sense of the way in which the culture is changing. The vast majority of people who use those apps use it to shake and be directed into things. And if the church isn't there, how are they going to find you? If the church is not participating in that space, how are they going to find you? Heck, I am addicted to Starbucks. I'll own that, I say. And my Starbucks app, I've allowed it to tell me when I'm near a Starbucks. And of course, Starbucks will even allow you to put in an order now before you get in line. It's just feeding my addiction. Right? That's called a digital fence. It enables me to find a Starbucks. And I allow it. People are allowing these apps, this world, this space to help them find what they're looking for. How are they going to find you if you don't have a digital fence? I think what we have in the Episcopal Church is amazing. And I love it. Earlier this week I was with some Duke students. They're saying, well, I don't like all that tech. Well, that's great. I'm glad you're here. What about all the people who do? What about all the people who are longing for transformation and can't find it because they're glued, they can't put down their phone for longer than 15 minutes? Right? What about them? Oh, is the gospel not for them, I guess? So the church doesn't get to go to them? How are we going to reach it? Are we released because they're all got their noses in their phone? All of a sudden we don't have to worry about it. No, of course not. The gospel is going to be undeterred in reaching God's people. Reconciliation is going to happen. We are in a culture where we, amplified human beings, navigate, curate, and self-learn our lives. We are making the worlds in which we live. We are manipulating, creating, and in charge of our own pilgrimage. And we live in a church who has a formation model that tells you you must come to believe, behave, and then you can belong. And I'm telling you, the culture says, I want to belong and I want to make. And then I might understand. But I want to do. I want to participate. I want community. We're in a culture where people's friends are their new families because of the brokenness of families. So how are you tapping into to the friends and their friendship circles? The big question is not what is the meaning of life for this culture, but who can I count on? Pop culture is essential to this culture. They define everything. They define everything through it. Shared spirituality, culturalism, shared spirituality, not religion. Desire for the wild. And they're going to react. This culture is reacting to previous generations' carelessness with everything from finances to creation to bodies to the environment and our priorities. And there is a great reordering underway. I don't really buy the generational stuff. I really don't. I think I've been doing this ministry long enough to know that we're talking about a reformation of culture itself. And that there certainly are some tendencies within generations, but I think the reality is that it goes across generations. So people of every age are using these platforms. Culture is shifting. And I get a lot of pushback on the self-learning piece. But here's one of the big issues that we have when you talk to seminary professors. They'll tell you that people come to seminary, they don't have any basic formation around who they are as Episcopalians. There's no catechetical training. And so the first year in seminary has been reordered over the last decade to try and give basics of the Episcopal faith to people. Because we have abandoned sharing that at any level with people. Not wanting to, I think it's out of a desire to be kind. I don't want to upset you. I'm an Episcopalian. Don't want to upset you. I believe in Jesus. Don't want to upset you. But you could come. So we completely allow. The other part of this is that we're in a crisis of faith formation in the church because we've abandoned talking about who we are. The reason why I wrote Unabashedly Episcopalian was I felt like we were in a crisis of identity. We didn't know who we are. We didn't have these basic values. Somehow we'd forgotten them. Or, see, I think because we spend all our time in liturgy, we think you're getting it by going to worship. You see what I'm saying? And you don't get enough. And it makes everything about worship. And instead of a ministry of the baptized, what we say is it's a ministry at the table. I mean, deeply rooted in the Episcopal faith is that we are all ministers, are we not? And yet we spend all our time convincing everybody that the best job is behind the table breaking bread. And that's not true. It's not true, but we've done it naturally. I think we've done it naturally. I don't think anybody is intending to do anything wrong. I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying, God, this is not working for us. And so how we do this? And so people push back and say, oh, well, people don't self-learn. So I want to just raise up Dr. Sugata Mitra, who decided he wanted to see what he was really interested in self-learning. Can human beings self-learn, right? So think a little bit about that Minecraft thing. But he wanted to learn so what is the real capacity for people to do this? So what he did was, you can go online and look him up on a TED Talk and hear all about it. Basically what he did was he set up a computer in a slum in India. And he wanted to see if the children would learn English by themselves. So he put a program on there. It was all completely self-directed by whoever used the thing. And what he watched over the months, the kids would come, and they start messing with it, and they started learning English. And then the older kids, or the kids who got it faster, would start teaching the younger kids. They started sharing what they were learning, and they'd watch and kind of look, say, oh, no. And they would self-learn them as individuals, and then as a community, they would navigate this program and begin to actually figure out how to speak English. So he wondered whether or not this was just unique to these particular children in this one area. So he set them up all over India and found out it wasn't. And then he wanted to see if he could teach them DNA sequencing. So, not unlike, the thing is, you can't just start out with DNA sequencing. You can't I want to teach you DNA. He's really trying to see, do they learn DNA sequencing? He doesn't want them to manipulate some computer thing. He wants to know, can they really do this? So for those of you who are people who know science, I'm not one of those, but you understand, of course, that you have to actually learn a lot of science to get to DNA sequencing. So there's a DNA sequencer right over here. It says I'm right. Right? So the thing is, so he had to do all this thing. Well, they go on, and they're doing it. They're teaching themselves all this science. These kids, in English, by the way. So they're teaching themselves this in English, all by themselves. They're just learning it and teaching each other how to do it. And then he notices the kids stop coming. So he goes and he finds out what's going on. Well, they had a problem. They can't get past this one thing, so they gave up. So he said, oh, okay, so what? I know what I'll do. So he went back to his office, he got a secretary. And he said, I need you to go do, and I call it the ministry of grandmother. And she said, well, what do you want me to do? She says, I know nothing about DNA sequencing. He said, I don't care, you don't have to know anything about it. In fact, I don't want you to know anything about it. All I want you to do is stand there whenever the kids come to the computer. I want you to stand there, and when they start working it, I want you to do things like, oh, that's interesting. Now, how'd you do that? And just ask them whatever question pops into your mind. And sure enough, they broke through that stumbling block they were having out of curiosity, support, and encouragement. Now, the amazing thing about this is that we treat people as if they don't self-learn and they're not interested. I actually think what we have to do is begin to put out enough information about who we are and our formation and everything else to draw people in, allow them to discover us. They're already looking. Most people who come to church today are not actually being invited by friends anymore. When I started ministry 20 years ago, the vast majority of people who came to church came because you invited them. Today, why do they come? They read something, they looked online, they found your church. That is a formation opportunity completely missed by us. So how do you begin to really allow formation to live and breathe throughout the whole organization is what I'm really getting to. How does it become continuous? How does it become continuous? So the reason why this is important is that the mission itself is diversifying, becoming more anti-fragile. So as the mission starts multiplying itself out in the world in different forms, formation's going to have to be a part of that. So no matter what you're doing, you could be in some kind of small, this is Laundry Love, right? Well, formation is taking place at Laundry Love. Laundry Love is this outreach where they go and they do laundry for people. Well, you begin to know that when you start creating a community, when you have to start putting people in there on a regular basis to pastorally care for people, to support one another. I mean, so when you start building that community, formation has to go along with that, right? You start forming and helping people understand who Jesus is and who God is. And that's happening all over, not just in Laundry Love, but in missional communities all over the Episcopal Church, outside of churches, where people are being sent out into the world to do things. And I think that formation has to travel with us into these places. We have to be intentional about helping people find and discover who God is in Jesus Christ. And this is Sarah Miles's work. You know, the other piece that's really changing drastically is how we do service. And service no longer is going to be kind of this idea, 1930s model, where we give people something. But I think we have to begin to form ourselves and understand that part of our formation is the actual relationship. And so what Sarah Miles did, she actually went into her community to do this work. The future church is going to be in the community with people, meeting people, knowing people, serving with them, putting together groups. So community, organizing things where you really go deep and learning one another's stories, sharing stories, beginning to be community again, because that's the one thing that is truly lacked, is one-on-one relationships with people like we are doing in this conference over the next couple of days. Where are we going to be doing that, and how do we use that space for formation? And what this means is that if you no longer can you imagine your church as one little thing when you think about your formation work, right? So it's not Sunday, oh, I don't, yeah, I'm here to tell you, yeah, you got to have to do two things at once. You got to deal with what the current system is, but you got to be looking at how we can get to this next system. And that's going to mean that formation, like the rest of the ministry, has to really engage with and touch on every layer of congregational life. Formation can no longer kind of be placed to the side as an extra add-on to the liturgy. It has to be fully part of that and engaging in it. It has to be part of the mission. It has to be part of the service. It has to be part of that. And part of that, I really believe, because the culture wants that. People in the culture deeply desire and are hoping to do transformative, real work in which their spiritual lives are deepening. They want to do that hand in hand with other people as they learn who God is. And I don't know what else formation is if it isn't that. If it isn't that. So, let's see. I have 10:30. How long am I supposed to go? Because I'm just going to keep going. Okay, so I have till 11, right? Okay. So, I'm going to do several stories very quickly. And several stories very quickly, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Here's the thing, and this gets into your business a little. The way we teach the Bible is completely oriented around sustaining the congregational life that we have today. We read the Bible through the lens of congregational life, and we are not able to hear the good news for ourselves or be challenged by the mission of Jesus because of it. So a couple of stories to get you started in thinking about this. The first one is the sower of the seeds. Now the way we think about the sower of the seeds is that there's a sower and he has some seeds and he goes out there and he sows these seeds. He's the worst farmer ever, right? So he sows seeds everywhere. It's all kinds of ground and rocks and birds and vines. And you know the story I'm talking about, right? So that's the sower, and there are these seeds and they're out there. And what we do with this in church is that we typically make this about church. So it's either about coming into church, and so I'm either the good ground or I'm the bad ground, or I got some vines, so it's me, it's about me, and so we constantly are saying, that the church, we're so glad you're here because you're that rocky ground and we're going to help you. And, or when we think about church planting, what we do is we say the church has to be the sower of the seeds. So we're going to go out and sow these churches, right, these communities, so we're the sower of the seeds. I want to offer you a different vision. And it's just a parable, so I'm not saying this is the truth. I'm just wondering out loud with you for a moment. Although I'm in some good stead with some theologians, so I didn't just make this up. God is the sower. God is the sower. And the seeds are Jesus Christ. And the ground, that's just the ground, people. It's just the ground. You see, what we're to do, as Vernon Dozier reminded us so many years ago, as the partners of God in creation, we're the ones to tend the garden. We're the ones to shoo away the birds and help pick up the gravel. We're the ones to go out and to water that dry patch of earth and to make some room for those seeds of Jesus Christ to take place and take root and live and thrive. And Episcopalians for many years have been doing that work. That's the way we have undertaken our mission and our ministry. So it is for us to join God in the world as the sower and to tend the garden that is already out there. And by doing that, what happens? Well, you begin to learn. You learn how the plants work, don't you? You learn how the ground is, and you have to make adjustments to yourself as you do that work as a gardener. Gardeners are never able to just simply get their will with plants. You learn to live with the plant, don't you? Right? So that's the first one. The second one I want to tell you about is about the calling of the disciples themselves. And just to simply say, as far as I can tell, none of the disciples asked about the sustainability of the mission when Jesus asked them to go do the work. Nor, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm not, so that's rhetorical. But I didn't see anywhere other than Jesus walking around doing stuff that they got to learn anything. All they do is follow him around, and then he sends them out. Right? I mean, there's no test. I don't remember a test. Right? The test is the work. And then what is it? He doesn't come back. When they come back, he go, wrong, you did that wrong. No, he reflects with them about what's going on. So it's just to say, how do we think about the formation from our deep scriptural roots? About what are the models, and rethinking, instead of taking our congregational view about what formation is, like planting that into some system, actually just look and see, as Malcolm Guide says, just see what Jesus' body, forget the words for a moment, just see what his body does and what the people do and who they're with and where they go and how they do it. Just look at that for a moment outside of your congregational view and see that there's more there. There's good news there for us, because we're working so hard, but we're not working smarter. Working so hard, but we're not necessarily working as Jesus worked. And so inviting us to do that. Then I want to go to this one. The Good Samaritan's a great parable, but we get this wrong. The Good Samaritan, we get it wrong, right? So he tells the parable because he's asked what? Who is my neighbor? And so do I need to tell this parable? Formation, okay. Thank God. Thank you, Jesus. Anybody remember what he says at the end of the parable? Something more. He asks a question. Yes. You see, Jesus is not so interested in who your neighbor is. Jesus in that passage seems to be very interested in who you're going to be neighbor to. So instead of thinking about us and them, maybe I would just be thinking about us going out there and being with them. and being their neighbors, instead of expecting them to come in here so they can be our neighbors. That's a very different thing. One of the real difficult pieces, and a bunch of ethicists have done some work on this, the real difficult thing is interpreting this passage, because neighbors were the people in your community. So what we are automatically doing is making, well, you're my neighbors. Now forget everybody else in this hotel, but you're the people at my conference, you're my neighbor. And what Jesus is saying is, no, 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 no. You're neighbors to everybody. And that's what you have to work on. It's very different, much more difficult than Jesus. How about this one, the woman at the well? Now I like this one because I think this one really helps us with our formation stuff. Jesus did not walk along and think to himself, I've got the best theological image of God and water. What I need to do is find a well. Somebody will come to that well, and then I will impart this amazing metaphor to them. And they will be profoundly changed and bring their whole town to me. Jesus was thirsty. Am I wrong? The Bible says Jesus is thirsty, he goes to the well. That's where you go get some water. And if you read the passage, I don't think they get along very well in the beginning. They don't. No, they don't like, she didn't like him at all. He's kind of a smarty pants. Right? But then he uses this image. He uses an image from the context to talk about what he's about. He uses an image, and he uses that in such a way that all of a sudden, everything becomes clear to her, doesn't it? And here's some profound words, I think, in this passage. Some people tell me I have to worship in the right places, like on the mountaintop. And then other people argue with us about having to worship in the right places, and that's at the temple. But here you are at this well, and you have taught me more than anybody else. All right, so this idea that the church, in the context of the world, uses the things from the world in order to translate who God is. We don't have information to impart. Our work is to go find the image in the culture that looks like and acts like resurrection, transformation, grace, love, mercy, forgiveness, and to use that in order to help people discover God's love for them. You say, well, I don't think that's right. Okay, so let's do Paul in Athens. Right? Now, Paul in Athens, this is a story, a lot of us don't like Paul, but I like Paul. Paul in Athens goes to Athens, and, Paul is not, he didn't like, he had a tough time. He got bitten by snakes and put in jail and stuff like that, but he gets over there to Athens, and so they want to ask him about all this mission stuff that he's talking about. And he uses the idol there of the unnamed God, right? Now, what's interesting about this is he doesn't, if you notice, he does not condemn the idol. It is not in there. He does not condemn the idol of the unnamed God. What he does is he slowly begins to convert them to monotheism using the idol of the unnamed God to talk about who the God and creator of all things is. And after he convinces them of that, only then can he convict their hearts of who Jesus is. So he actually converts them to monotheism before he ever gets to Jesus. And he does that not by condemning the world, but by transforming the images that are used by the world in other ways to reveal who God is. The other piece, and I'll leave you with this, and then I'm going to give you some questions, and then we can do some Q&A. Philip and the Ethiopian. You all know this one? Philip, I kind of feel like Philip sometimes just kind of a peer and engaged with people. But I think this is really important. Philip himself does not go looking for the Ethiopian eunuch, but finds himself there by the blessing of God, which I think is an image for us. in our real life, in our worlds outside of church, 7 days a week. And then it is the eunuch who actually asks all the questions. And it's only in the asking of the questions that Philip begins the conversation with the eunuch. So I just offer that because I think sometimes we're so eager that we don't wait to listen and invite the questions before we start to tell what we know. And that's a bitter piece. It's like the dark shadow of this false hierarchy around education that I'm talking about, which is once we get it, we want to show people out of our own just nature what we know. And for the Christian mission in this new age, we really are going to have to wait and listen and have real relationships and allow people to invite conversation with us. So these are the questions that I think have more power for us. Again, they're Peter Block's questions. So the thing I want to ask and invite you to consider is, what commitment do you hold that you've brought into the room today for this work? What is the price that you or others have paid to be here, to do this work? How important is it? In the scheme of things for you in your life, how valuable is this work? And once you figure that out, what's the crossroads where you're standing? What's the crossroads where you stand and that you face before you can move forward? What decisions are going to be required of you? What's the story that you keep telling yourselves about the problems in your community? What are the gifts you hold that have not been brought fully into the world? What is your contribution to the very thing that you complain about? And what is it about your team and group or neighborhood that no one knows, but you do and see as a tremendous gift and opportunity? I think these are the questions that have a great deal of power for you and anybody you're working with. And in them, deeply in them, is the seed of God's recreative power for us. Time for a few questions and answers. What do you all want to talk about? Yes. Now stand up. I'll try and repeat the question. So we'll go over here first.
Sure. Hi. So anytime that we are looking at making major changes, there has to be sacrifices. So I was wondering what sort of things, as we're looking at a paradigm shift, what sort of things that you see that those of us who are already in the church are going to have to be flexible with sacrificing so that we're able to meet people where they're at in the world?
Thank you. The question is, what kind of sacrifices will the church have to make in order to meet people where they are in the world? It's going to be pain-free. I'm just kidding. I really think, see, as bishop, I contribute to a large part of this problem. And so my work, my ministry in the future is to stop that, which is very difficult. I think we have to be willing to say that we haven't always gotten it right. We have to be ready to confess both the wrongs we did not intend and we did not know were wrongs. And then we also need to confess that we are forgiven. I think that's another thing. See, I wonder if in some way this is a great question, because I wonder whether we really think we've been forgiven, you see. I wonder if we really do believe in grace. See, it all seems so very important to the church. Church, congregation, however you want to call this thing, all seems so very important to the church people. When I got into ministry, and I bet this is true for a lot of you, I did not want to go to board meetings. Right? I didn't say, oh, I can't wait to be a priest to go to board meeting. Can't wait to be a priest to do the weekly bulletin. What this Reformation, and I don't think we should pretend that it's anything less than a Reformation, is going to entail is the message of Jesus to his disciples to travel lightly with very little things and depend upon the hospitality of others. We cannot believe because the structures and forms and economies and the ways that we receive church, those are not the kingdom of God. And we as a church have been pretending that it is. But the kingdom that Jesus proclaims, kingdom of the Scripture, doesn't look a whole lot like the church I live in. Does it? Now, there are pieces of it, right? There are glimpses. N.T. Wright says, one of the beautiful things he says is every great, beautiful, good thing the church does is a piece of the kingdom, and there is so much of that. I see it all the time. But it's not at those meetings. It's in the relationships. It's in the visitation of people on lives that are changed because somebody cared, somebody picked up the phone, somebody walked in with a casserole. It's the relationship. What makes the Episcopal Church great are its people. And that is the most beautiful thing. That's the kingdom. Those are glimpses of the kingdom. But we're going to have to give up on the idea that church, the way we've received it, is the high water mark of God's mission. And that, my friends, is going to be painful. Now, I do believe that I don't need to go around telling everybody how to do it. My job is to walk, coach, invite, participate with, listen, do that. So we're not alone. Everybody else is going to be going through this too. It's not bad news. Remember, we believe that God in grace, and we believe that the gospel is bigger than we are. So we're good. We're good. Deep breaths. What else? Yes, in the middle.
Good morning. When you were talking about the videos of people playing Minecraft,
Yeah.
I was struck in that there is a parallel that could be drawn between the way we do liturgy and profess that
Yes.
shapes the meaning. Could you either agree or disagree with
Yeah.
that that could be drawn?
Yeah.
The way that we could perhaps more fully teach our liturgy?
Yeah. Praying does, I think that's deeply rooted in the Episcopal psyche, that praying does shape believing, right? So that you did. One of the things that I think is brilliant about the way Nadia Bolz-Weber does her thing is nobody's assigned anything. You just walk in and pick something to do during that day. In other words, everybody can do liturgy. Right? So yeah, I do think that. I am not an advocate for getting rid of the liturgy. If you heard that, you misheard me. I'm an advocate for not having the liturgy live only inside our church for 1 hour a week.
Amen.
That's the problem. The problem isn't that the liturgy. The problem isn't that as Episcopalians we value the two key sacraments, the gospel sacraments of baptism and Eucharist. That's not the problem. The problem is that we hoard it and keep it to ourselves and pretend that mission. I mean, you all would not. I will tell you, I know what our sin is. We think that what we do inside our church is mission. What we do, listen to that again. We have convinced ourselves that what we do inside our church is mission. That is not true. Now, great things can happen. I'm not denying. I was brought up in the church. I love this church. I was transformed by the people in the church. But stuff that happens inside the church is not mission. Mission itself happens outside, in the world, outside of church, not on Sunday morning. That's where mission happens, out in the world. Repeat after me. Mission happens out in the world. Mission happens out in the world. You would not believe it. Mission grant. People put together a mission grant. Oh, we want choir robes. Oh, choir robes. The great missionary purchase of choir robes. Now, I'm not against choir. I'm not against great music, right? I'm an Episcopalian. I like all kinds of music. But that's not mission. You see what I'm saying? We've convinced ourselves that Sunday morning for 1 hour, we do mission by doing liturgy, and that is a lie. That is not what Jesus, I don't see Jesus, in fact, you read the whole Bible, you think about that passage we had the other day, where he goes in and reads Isaiah 61 in the synagogue. He goes in the synagogue to remind them everything's supposed to be happening outside. The only reason the apostles and Jesus go in synagogues is to send people outside. Now you find me one passage in the Bible that says that they came in there and it was all supposed to be happening in the synagogue. And it's not there. It's not there. Matthew's got, I've been reading through the scripture again because I'm interested in this topic. Matthew says, in I think it's chapter 13, but I'm not really sure. I can't remember, so I just found it. I don't remember. I've read this. I have read the Bible so many times. I don't remember this passage. Jesus says, there is something greater than the temple here. Now see, that's a message for us. But when we're constantly thinking in congregation, the temple's us. So we don't read that part. That's for somebody, that's about somebody else. Paul's persecution of the innovators, that's somebody persecuting us. Not us persecuting innovators within our communities. We change everything. Right here in front. You have a question?
Yeah, I'm in a community where our kids are really pretty clear about the world they live in and how they learn and what they need to learn and grow their faith. But I often find myself in an exchange where it's sort of, kids tell me what they need, I bring that to the other adults, the adults say, nah, that's not how we did it, we're not doing that. I can be mad about it or I can change, you know. Just this morning I texted my youth group kiddos, I said, hey, I'm at this thing to learn how to be a better youth minister, what do you want me to learn? And I've got a phone full of texts. They're clear about what they need. They're clear about what they want. But what I'm looking for are innovative ways to be a translator, to be an advocate. Because I really feel like that's an important part of my role, and this model, it's not working. You know, we've got the kids who know what they want, the adults make all the decisions, and there's
Right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's just a basic statement that there's a huge disconnect about where the natural hunger for children is in discovery versus what adults think children need in terms of discovery. Those are two very different things. And I just echo the frustration. I think it's a huge deal. And I mean, we act as if it's not the church's fault that there aren't people in church. Don't we? I mean, we blame it on the culture. We blame it on everything. We will project it on everything except that maybe the pedagogical models that we've used for the last 50 years don't work. Huh? Oh. Ouch. Mirror. Sorry. You know, so okay. So let's move on. I mean, I think you've got a whole wealth. I was looking at the workshops. You've got a whole wealth of people who are here to help you talk about that and figure it out. But it's okay to try and to fail. That's the one thing I say all the time. Fail gloriously. Try it. Kids are resilient. You know, I think let them. Now you have to. I'm also not one of the. I'm not trying to create some consumer church. I want to be really clear about that. We're going to take in tow with us our theology, our spirituality, our Book of Common Prayer. But you're really looking for those avenues where you can put that into the conversation. But you're going to. So you see what I'm saying? It's much more of a coaching relationship. Coaches aren't just sitting there telling people what they want to hear. Coaches bring to the table a wealth of resources for the individual they're working with. So it's much more of a coaching disciple program than it is a pedagogical teacher-student program. I think over here, and then I'll come back this way. Is there somebody up in the back? I need to go to the back after this, so yes.
I think part of what I think you're getting at is that we're having trouble convincing the adults. We have a sense of what's needed from our kids, from our youth. We're having trouble convincing the rector. We're having trouble convincing the parents.
Right.
That actually what we're moving toward doesn't look like a classroom model.
Right.
And that's part of what we're needing help translating.
It is. I think it's huge because I think we feel guilty because we don't come. So I was with a church the other day, for instance. I mean, I disagree. I mean, all I can do is like do this and say, you're the adults, right? I mean, I can say that and empower you and encourage you. That's my room. I'm trying to make some safe space for creative, innovative thinking so we can get through this journey. So I just encourage you to keep at it. Don't fail this generation by giving in to people who think the old model is going to keep working. So I want to encourage you on that. But I think the other piece is we really feel bad about it. And so I can't tell you how many churches I go to. Oh, if we just had a youth group. No, forget that. You got 10 kids doing acolytes. Just focus on the kids you got, right? Stop trying to program these people. I mean, the last thing these kids, this is one of the biggest pieces. These kids are over-programmed, over-calendared. Everybody has a child. Just give me an amen on that, right? I mean, it's nuts. So stop trying to add. It will mean more to those children for you to show up at a soccer game than it is for you to require them to come to a class on Sunday morning. Right? I mean, but see, this is the other thing. I thought it was really interesting. Somebody said we're not going to blame soccer. I love that. No, what? Okay, so, well, I'm sure that all of the other things that the Romans had to do really kept the apostles from spreading the gospel. They were so upset about those Romans because they had all those other ideas about what life was about. Okay, so people want to play soccer. So when are you going to do service for those families? You're not released. We're not going to blame and shame our families because they have more than they can deal with, and the only time they have off to themselves is to read the paper on Sunday morning. We're not going to shame them. Our job is to find out how to provide worship where they could enjoy themselves with other adults in worship, form their kids. They are spiritually hungry people, right? I mean, the vast majority of them believe and are longing for relationship with God and with others. They're just busy. We have not, somehow we've abdicated believing that Sunday morning, if they don't come on Sunday, then that's their fault. Because mission happens in the church. See, if mission happens outside the church, then we would start thinking about where do we go where the people are? Did we send a lay chaplain to the soccer team game? Oh, did we go pray with our kids over at the soccer? Were we there? I mean, where are we in their lives? I think these are really big questions for us. Okay, I'm sorry, I was going to come back here, but there's one in the back, and then I'll come to the front again. Yes?
Carl Fosno. I'm at a church in Diaspora. We have lost our building, and we are learning to do mission where there is no filter, there's no barrier.
Yes.
And but there's also that strong, static pull to turn what we do have now into a new barrier, a new church where the mission is inside, not outside. So my question is, because this is the one that I'm personally wrestling with, what is confirmation in this new world?
Ooh, confirmation?
What is confirmation in this new world?
Oh man, I think you mean like the thing I do? I mean, you're talking about I'm sorry, I'm not trying to make fun. I'm wondering, are you actually asking about the sacrament of confirmation?
The sacramentality is, the idea of public affirmation of faith, to go beyond knowledge, which is what your beautiful presentation discussed, to comprehension and then analysis and in church terms, public affirmation. Because right now it's stuck in 7th grade, and I see no 7th graders in my church. We will not have a confirmation class probably ever again. But to actually own public affirmation of faith, what does that look like? Because even Cranmer had pushback from people saying, why do you have this confined to adolescents? This really needs to be something for you. I'm giving you my answer to the question. Because it's I think a viable spirituality that's going to be lost if we don't reform it along with this larger information.
So, So here's what I think is going to happen. Well, this is what I'm imagining. If we could become a body of people who all carry the work of formation in ourselves and are very clear about these kind of core pieces which are us as Episcopalians, we would understand that the journey and pilgrimage with God and Jesus Christ is a lifelong walk. And confirmation would be freed from the false understanding that you have achieved some hierarchy of knowledge that now prepares you to bear witness to other people, and would return to the apostles, the image of the apostles sitting in Jerusalem. Right, by the way, that all the disciples became apostles, right? I mean, they all become people who don't follow anymore. They become people who go. That's the meaning of apostleship. So they are sitting in Jerusalem, and they see all those baptisms happening. And so what they do is we got to go down there. They're baptizing all these people. We need to go give and pray the Holy Spirit on these people and lay hands on them. I actually think what we want to do is break this open so that it doesn't matter whether they went to class. Why doesn't the bishop come to your congregation and give the Holy Spirit to people and pray for them and confirm what's already in them? I mean, the prayer of reaffirmation is beautiful in and of itself. God has already begun something wonderful in you. I mean, so, how do we begin to really think about that? I do think that there's some piece of this for us to move away from the Reform arguments around baptism and confirmation and all that business, and move back to a centrality of baptism for all people, and then reorient the bishop as a spirit giver, a uniter of communities in a different way. So I do explore some of that and what the requirements for the future of the different vocations will be, and talk a little bit about this in my book. But I think that we're really going to be drastically changed vocationally over the next 50 years. So I don't think that's going to go. I don't see things going away so much as I see them being transformed, which is going to make a lot of people nervous. And so now that I've made you nervous more, if that was possible, I'm going to close down and leave you with just a reminder about the website, amplifiedchurch.com, resources.
Sorry, could you put up those questions that
Yeah, sure. I'll put them up while I read you this last thing, and then you all can get those. There's Peter Block. And it's Peter Block, and the book's Community. It's a great book. It's a great book. So I want to leave you with a piece from Rilke's Book of Hours. Yeah. So just to ponder this in as you go through the rest of your day and your time and your vocation and ministry, and know the great and incredible gratitude that I as a bishop have for you and for your ministry in this place. God speaks to each of us as he makes us, then walks with us silently out of the night. These are the words that we dimly hear. You, sent out beyond your recall. Go to the limits of your longing. Embody me. Flare up like a flame and make big shadows that I can move in. Let everything happen to you. Beauty and terror. Just keep going. For no feeling is final. Don't let yourself lose me. Nearby is the country that they call life, and you will know it by its seriousness. So give me your hand. Amen.
Amen.
Y'all have a great conference. Thank you.